Ladies and gentlemen, the theme for today's session is Malaysia's energy transition outlook. Resonates well with the Chamber's priorities, which are motivated and aligned by the action and interests of our members on the agenda. The BMCC is very pleased to play an active role to advocate for actions to combat climate action in the private sector, especially for Malaysian organizations, exemplified when we organized our first Climate Action Week in October last year, where we introduced the BMCC Climate Action Pledge to encourage climate change practices within Malaysian businesses. We are proud to say that up to date, we have a total of 28 organizations that have signed the pledge, are putting in efforts in the climate action journey. In March this year, the Chamber took another progressive step forward to sign formal partnerships with like-minded organizations like the UN Global Compact and the British Standard Institute Malaysia, where the BMCC will work with these partners to provide the support to help organizations to implement programs to achieve their climate action goals. The BMCC's commitment to climate action is also reflected in the BMCC Energy Committee. I'm delighted to share that the Energy Committee has set one of its current priorities to support Malaysia's energy transition agenda and journey to a net zero economy to collaborations at strategic levels. The initiatives will be driven through a working group dedicated to focusing on energy transition programs and initiatives. So today's program is a testament to the Energy Committee members' commitment. We are pleased to have this afternoon in attendance important stakeholders in Malaysia's energy transition journey, both from the public and private sector, represented by our distinguished lineup of speakers. On that note, I would like to convey our appreciation to our distinguished panel, His Excellency Charles Hay. Thank you, Your Excellency, for your time, for being here this afternoon to share your views, as well as for your commitment to advocate the climate action agenda in Malaysia and always your support for the Chamber. Our appreciation to all our speakers, Charlotte, James, for being here to share about their organization's energy transition journey from industry's point of view. I look forward to their sharing. And to Dr. Rizal from Nano, Malaysia, and Encik Muhammad Nazri from Seda, who will be sharing with us some of the initiatives by the government on hydrogen technology, EV, and sustainable energy. So all exciting information that we look forward to hearing more about. And last but not least, to our appreciation to our supporting partners, EIC and MOXIE, as well as all the team members behind the scene putting this exciting program together. So with that, thank you all for attending, and I hope you will find today's forum an insightful one. Thank you. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Jennifer. Indeed, we are very honored today to have a very distinguished lineup of speakers, and especially we are very honored also to have His Excellency Charles Hay, the British High Commissioner to Malaysia, with us today. With COP26 being hosted in Glasgow last November, I'm sure there are many significant outcomes that he would like to share with us, and especially insights on how it would help energy transition, and also take it for companies and governments to take actions against climate change. So without further ado, let me invite His Excellency Charles to give his opening remarks.
Daniel, thank you very much. Thank you very much also, Jennifer. And a very warm welcome to all of you taking part in this webinar, wherever you may be. There's a huge amount that we could talk about, but I want to zoom in on just a couple of things. So let me start with some relatively breaking news. I hope all of you will have heard of the newest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or the IPCC, which was published just last week. And if you haven't had a chance to familiarize yourself with it, then I do urge you to, because at its core, this is a report about energy, and it has profound implications for our climate change crisis and how we act on it. And out of all the reams and reams of analysis and data in this report, I just want to highlight one number, 85%. 85%. That is how much less a unit of solar energy costs today than it did in 2010. And this dramatic fall in the cost of renewable energy generation is extraordinary, and it far outstrips any predictions that we've made in the past, as scale and technology have taken off. And this falling cost of renewables is visible across technologies, from wind to lithium batteries, as demand for zero emission vehicles surges. And this IPCC report compellingly shows that across all sectors, from agriculture to buildings, transport to energy, substantial mitigation opportunities already exist. And we also know with greater and greater clarity that inaction has its costs. And the other part of the IPCC report on climate adaptation that was published back in February, that gives a clear indication of the impact that we're already experiencing from climate change. And we've seen this very clearly in Malaysia over the past months. The flooding in the Klang Valley last December and on the East Coast Peninsula. These have real costs for lives and livelihoods, as well as, of course, for business. Now, when we take both of these IPCC reports on climate adaptation and mitigation together, I think we see a clear picture emerging, which is the transitioning to a low carbon economy is the safest, but also the most competitive choice any country, business, or investor can make. The IPCC report also contains some pretty dire warnings about our current trajectory, where we're headed to. If we look at our current national climate pledges, we are not on track to keeping global warming below 1.5 degrees. And the window of opportunity to keep 1.5 alive, as we say, is rapidly closing. So the Glasgow Climate Pact, which was agreed at COP26 last year, remains all the more pressing. And countries recognized back then that national pledges need to be revisited this year and aligned with the 1.5 degree goal. And countries agreed to step up plans to adapt to climate change. Now, when I look back at the last 3 years, we've made tremendous progress in reorientating towards a net zero world. When the UK began preparing to host COP26, just 30% of the world economy was covered by net zero goals. But by the time of COP26, this had reached 90%. So all of this means that 1.5 is alive, but only just. And we need to do a lot more in the short term to keep 1.5 alive. I've talked about the Glasgow Climate Pact. It wasn't the only outcome of COP26. There were a number of other very sector-specific outcomes that were announced on reversing deforestation, phasing out coal, zero-emission vehicles, and so on and so on. Most notably for Malaysia and for the energy sector, over 100 countries signed the Global Methane Pledge, committing signatories to contributing to a 30% reduction in methane by 2030. Now, as you all know, methane is short-lived in the atmosphere, but it's a very potent greenhouse gas. So rapid reductions in the amount of methane emitted from energy, agriculture, and waste sectors will make important contributions to keeping 1.5 alive. But of course, as so often in the climate change world, the real work goes on in the private sector. So I urge you too to consider how you can support this methane reduction goal. Let me reflect also on two recent developments since COP26. Firstly, of course, top of the news bulletins, and much of our attention has been captured by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And amongst other things, I think what this act has demonstrated is the vulnerability caused to us by dependence on fossil fuels. And I think this invasion is prompting efforts not just to switch to alternative fossil fuel supplies, but to switch entirely away from fossil fuel to alternative energy sources, which in turn will accelerate the clean energy transition. And that too is happening in the UK. In the UK, we're working to catalyse an even faster transition to clean energy. And last week, the UK released a new energy security strategy, which again, I would encourage you to have a look at, because it shows how energy independence, security, and prosperity can go hand in hand. And what we're setting in place through this strategy is measures that could see up to 95% of UK electricity being low carbon by 2030. It sets new ambitions for offshore wind, up to 50 gigawatts by 2030, and that will be enough for every home in the UK. And in other sectors, hydrogen, nuclear, solar, new goals have been set that will lower consumer bills, which is obviously very important at the moment, while supporting tens of thousands of new clean energy jobs. TNB's new investment in the UK, when they acquired a 97 megawatt onshore wind portfolio, shows the continuing attractiveness of the UK energy sector and the appeal of our long-term policy commitments to a clean energy transition. And for those of you interested in discussing that further, my team in the High Commission from the UK Department for International Trade are ready to facilitate your international clean energy investments. In the other direction, our National Export Credit Agency, UK Export Finance, has set its own net zero commitment prior to COP26. Like DIT, UKEF will no longer support UK export interests in coal and oil production and will only look at gas if strict considerations are met. But in turn, a wealth of British expertise from finance to law firms, from data providers to energy consultancies stand ready to contribute to your climate innovation and scale up efforts. Now, here in Malaysia, you will all probably be aware of the changes coming to Malaysia's climate policies. The Malaysian government is still developing the details of its carbon tax and emissions trading schemes, and it's also developing its long-term strategy for how to reach net zero emissions as early as 2050. And I'd urge you all, as individual companies, as businesses, as industries, and the community to contribute to this strategy so that your ambitions can be reflected in Malaysia's climate transition plan. I congratulate BMCC on the Climate Action Pledge community that you've set up, and I think you're all going to be ahead of this coming curve. Congratulations also on the MOUs, which Jennifer mentioned, with the UN Global Compact and the BSI. I hope that both these partnerships will enable more practical guidance for pledge supporters to learn, support, and share their decarbonisation experiences and journeys. And in particular, BSI has been at the heart of developing relevant international standards, including for all stages of a company's carbon cutting efforts. I also want to note the definite change in the pace of corporate climate commitments. I'm delighted that today's outlook includes Sarawak Energy, which of course was the first major Malaysian company to join the Science Based Targets initiative. And I'm encouraged to see that that number from that start has grown to 12 Malaysian companies in the last 2 years, but more are needed. And I believe the SPTI, the Science Based Targets initiative, will become the gold standard for corporate carbon claims. And companies that set science-based targets are going to stand out in an increasingly competitive marketplace. Ladies and gentlemen, the new IPCC report gives a clear signal about what needs to happen to keep 1.5 alive. Global emissions need to peak now and halve by 2030. And what you do in the energy sector will be vital to our hopes of averting the worst impacts of climate change and realizing a safe, healthy, and prosperous future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, His Excellency, for the updates. Next, we have PETRONAS as our national oil and gas company and trusted to manage the nation's oil and gas resources is also displaying leadership in the climate agenda by committing to be a progressive energies and solutions partner, thus enriching lives for a sustainable future. And in addition to that, they have also announced their aspirations to achieve a net zero carbon emissions by 2050. And today we are very pleased to have with us Charlotte Wolfby, Vice President and Chief Sustainability Officer of PETRONAS, to share with us about their 2050 aspirations and their strategic plans to achieve such feat. Over to you, Charlotte.
Well, thank you very much, Danielle, and Your Excellency Charles Hay, and distinguished fellow speakers, and thank you for everybody who tuned in today. Really great to be here. So I wanted to start my remarks by reflecting a little bit on the global context, and also to say that I believe we are at the doorstep of a new energy future. The energy transition that we all heard so much about is about to be the biggest technology change of our lifetime. Now, we heard, of course, from His Excellency Charles Hay that we have a conflict in Europe, and it is really causing a sort of energy supply crunch right now. And this is re-emphasizing energy security and affordability. And it also is prompting diversification of energy mix, as we heard in the UK, sort of pushing renewables faster into the system. And it's also, we've seen that it's spurred a renewed interest in gas as a transition fuel and nuclear, both forms of energy that were perhaps not so much in favor only 6 months ago. So in the short term, top of mind is access to reliable and affordable energy, but mid to long term, decarbonization is the defining issue. Now, what is very clear is that what we've seen in this current challenging situation in the world with the energy supply crunch is that the energy transition that we all want and need can't be delivered without the oil and gas industry. So legacy systems need to be decarbonized, and renewables and low carbon solutions must be scaled up at the same time. Now, I would also say that globally, there's very good momentum in the oil and gas sector to deliver low carbon energy solutions. And this is particularly true for sort of progressive end of the industry. But overall, globally, the direction, the frameworks and incentives remain unclear. And there's also a looming skills gap in the industry globally. And this will affect both the scale and speed of the energy transition. I was attending a major energy event in Houston recently, where we heard that almost 500,000 workers from the oil and gas services sector had actually left the industry in the last few years. We actually need these good talents to decarbonize the existing systems, but also to build the future energy systems. So everything that I mentioned here is really pointing to that this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and we will see a massive reallocation of capital into energy. At this same event that I attended, I heard one of the Wall Street banks mentioning that by 2050, annually, we need about $1.8 trillion towards clean energy in annual investments. And then in addition to that, about 2 trillion every year towards infrastructure and clean water. So these are enormous transfers of money into these new systems and new infrastructure that is needed. So the capital is shifting to a carbon light world and is all chasing bankable projects. Now, net zero carbon emissions by 2050 is very much the focal point of the industry globally. But as we also heard from the initial remarks, is that not only country roadmaps, but also company roadmaps will overshoot 1.5 degrees as it is currently. There's much more work to be done. And if you see a strategy being published, it probably will be sort of 1.0, and many more strategies need to be delivered before we kind of find a perfect formula for net zero carbon emissions. So why is it so difficult to kind of to develop these strategies? And I mean, this is such a tremendous transformation required. This isn't actually about shaving off some emissions here and there or a bit of continuous improvement. This is actually a full transformation required. And it's not just about the energy industries, the whole ecosystem and society as a whole. We all have to change how we do things. This is a gigaton problem, and it can't be dealt with megatons. So really what we need here is a mind shift change, a skills change, investment change. We need to think about risk in new ways. So there really is a lot of change required for this to keep this 1.5 degree alive, as we heard. Now, what I would like to just maybe turn to Malaysia from the global sector. So the situation is well understood in Malaysia, and there's been a strong steer from the Malaysian government, particularly through the 12th Malaysia Plan, promoting renewables, electric vehicles and carbon pricing, And also all the commitments made around COP26, for instance, as we heard, signing up to the Global Methane Pledge, which is about reducing methane emissions by up to 30% by 2030. And also the Malaysia's ambition to reach net zero carbon emission as early as 2050. So even if 2050 seems like a long way away, this decade will be the decade of delivery. And that's what the IPCC reports also talk about. We must take the opportunity now to drastically cut emissions by 2030. And this is absolutely essential, yet again, to keep the 1.5 degree alive. Now, PETRONAS, how do we fit into all of this? So we are determined to seize new opportunities for sustainable, profitable growth as we uphold our responsibility as Malaysia's national oil company and lay the foundation for our future. And of course, we are directly in support of the government of Malaysia ambitions. Now, PETRONAS' strategic intent is something that we call moving forward together 50-30-0. Well, let me break this down for you, this strategy of ours. So moving forward together, 50 means a 50% improvement in cash flow from operations by 2025. So this means running our business prudently, creating value and managing our oil and gas resources safely and responsibly. Now, the 30 in our strategy is actually indicating an ambition to have 30% of our revenues from non-traditional sources by 2030. And this is a tremendous challenge and a tremendous target for us. And how are we going to go about achieving this? We aim to grow in renewables. For instance, already today, we're nearing close to 1 gigawatt hours of solar capacity in operation and under development. But it also means a very strong ethos of innovation, taking calculated steps into things like hydrogen, building new forays within specialty chemicals, and so on. We see good opportunities in circular economy, and we have a tremendous internal focus on innovation, research and development. We also are very proactive in venture investments, incubating new ideas, and as well as partnering across the industry and beyond. Now, moving forward together 50-30, but what about the zero? The zero is our long-term aspiration of net zero carbon emissions by 2050. So let's focus on that a little bit. So we are in the process of defining our 2050 pathways. The details will emerge, but the broad outlines are clear. And of course here, the scientific consensus through the IPCC reports, they kind of set the frameworks for the industry. But maybe for those who haven't digested all these scientific reports, maybe just one paragraph about what does net zero carbon emissions actually mean? So what we know from the IPCC reports that emissions need to be cut drastically by 2030. And by 2050, we should not emit any additional carbon dioxide into the atmosphere unless it can be coupled with permanent removals. And these removals can be either engineered solutions or natural solutions. I guess the main point is that we need to eliminate emissions as fast as possible. So at PETRONAS, we see opportunity in this transition. And our three-pronged strategy really focuses our mind on value creation while creating new sources of revenues and decoupling revenues from emissions. Now, our path forward will include both hydrocarbons as well as many new areas. And we understand, of course, that as we are venturing into new areas and opportunities, we need to be a trusted partner in the energy transition. So if you venture into things that you haven't been doing before, it's very important to sort of demonstrate your acumen and ambition and focus on delivery. So for that, I wanted to sort of focus on two things that we feel that are particularly important to be this trusted partner in the energy transition. One is transparency, and the other one is to show real demonstrable action. So what do I mean by transparency? We have to be clear about our strategy, be open about reporting on our progress and measurements, also set targets towards net zero 2050. And these targets need to be both short, mid, and long term in nature. And this is something we're working on in PETRONAS. So to ensure that we are transparent and well trusted by stakeholders, we have recently expressed our public support towards 3 international frameworks. One is the Stakeholder Capitalism Metrics that came out of the World Economic Forum International Business Council. And this has also now formed a basis for the International Sustainability Standards Board that's come up with its first draft guidelines. We've also signatory to the Zero Routine Flaring by 2030 initiative by the World Bank that also includes a reporting element. And we've also expressed our public support for the recommendations by the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, the TCFD. And this TCFD disclosures have actually now become mandatory in the United Kingdom for major companies. And this is something that we also are preparing at PETRONAS. So what about demonstrable action? So what's absolutely essential for a company such as PETRONAS is to reduce upstream greenhouse gas emissions. And by here, I mean scope 1 and 2 for those who like the technical terms. And this we achieve through a combination of energy efficiency and particularly by reducing flaring and venting, but also looking at opportunities of electrification of various processes, as well as carbon capture and storage. And this is not something new for us. We've actually just recently, at the end of last year, we concluded 8 greenhouse gas emission reduction projects completed across Sarawak, Sabah, and Peninsular Malaysia. And basically, these projects together reduce emission about 3.8 million tons of CO2 per annum. But of course, upstream decarbonization isn't enough in a net zero carbon world. We can't just work on our own emissions. We also need to work with customers to provide a clean source of energy. And here we see really a great opportunity to develop new value chains and growth opportunities. And here new energy solutions will come to the fore, such as hydrogen, biofuels, but also carbon capture and storage. And hydrogen is seen essential to meet net zero commitments across the world. And in the downstream, it's key to utilize refinery capability to low carbon manufacturing, linking carbon capture and storage, synthetic fuels, and maybe even municipal waste and so on. So there are many, many great opportunities. So how do we go about in PETRONAS to capture these opportunities? We've actually announced in February that we're going to establish a new energy solutions business sometime this year. So this year will be 2022 will really be a year when we're stepping up in more meaningful way to sort of pursue our purpose. So this new business will bring together our interests in renewables, hydrogen, as well as green mobility. We've also announced our intention to set up a carbon management unit that is actually already up and running. And together, we believe that PETRONAS will evolve into an energy superstore that will provide customers with a suite of sustainable energy solutions. Now, I wanted to mention just a little bit about the carbon management unit, because PETRONAS is now envisaging or sort of positioning Malaysia as a leading carbon capture and storage hub in this region. And we're really taking deliberate steps to explore this opportunity with a number of industry partners. So the idea here is to develop a carbon dioxide storage as a practice to decarbonize Malaysia's upstream oil and gas sector, but also to offer CO2 like a storage solution service for the region, not just for oil and gas, but also for other industries to benefit from this. And we've already signed a number of memorandum of understanding with various partners to pursue these efforts. And of course, there's good examples to go from in the United Kingdom, where there are many projects now under development across the country. Now, just to conclude, I would want to leave you with sort of 5 thoughts for the energy transition. And the first point is, we're not going away. So the oil and gas production will still be needed. We know with the current situation in the world that even in the transition to net zero, hydrocarbons are required, but how they are produced really matters. And the second point is about growth. Our industry has extensive experience in implementing, investing, and operating large offshore infrastructure projects. And also we have this deep knowledge of subsurface technologies, geoscience, and reservoir management. So this means that our industry and knowledge also here in Malaysia is particularly suited to the development of carbon capture and storage and hydrogen. And both of these areas have tremendous growth potential. The opportunity is pretty much endless. Now, the third point is around skills. In this energy transition, it will be absolutely essential to retain our talent pool, but also to attract new minds to the industry. We need all those bright minds and talents to the energy transition. And that is really, really important so we can scale up our new technology and deploy it as quickly as possible. And the fourth point is around people and nature. Climate change is a complex problem and to which no single solution exists. I mean, the climate negotiation rounds are now in their starting soon the 28th cycle, when actually it was only supposed to be a one-off meeting. So 30 years ago. So it is really, we know that this is a very complex situation. But to create a new energy future for Malaysia, we know also that we will take much more than just emission reductions. So we must put the human at the center of our approach and also consider nature. Malaysia is, I think, the 12th most diverse, has the 12th most diverse ecosystem in the world of worldwide significance. And also we know from the Paris Agreement, where it talks in the preamble that no climate action can go without sort of focusing on people first. So it's absolutely essential that we look at, as we're addressing climate change, we address the sort of the bigger picture. And for us in the sector, what that means is that as we deploy a range of new technologies in transform supply chains, we need to secure jobs, and also as we're busy developing these new approaches, we must protect nature and also enable better prospects for the many communities we touch. And my fifth and final point is about the opportunity going forward and for Malaysia. So net zero future implies a full transformation of energy systems, and with that also supply chain. So we need strong collaboration across the industry and government. And this will really help ensure nobody will be left behind, and the energy transition will bring better prospects for more people. And really the opportunity here is to maximize the advantages for Malaysia from the global shift to clean growth, and to build a competitive strength in clean energy export markets. The opportunity is tremendous. We need to keep the cost base competitive, but this is, if we sort of read the writing on the wall, there's only opportunity, but we do need to work together to make sure we have the same vision for the future. So this is kind of what we're focusing on in PETRONAS right now. We're very busy working at it. And also we would like to take the opportunity for sharing our thoughts and current activities with you here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for such an insightful sharing. Yeah, sustainability is definitely something that she's really passionate about and has most recently contributed to the book Corporate Sustainability in Practice, a guide for strategy development and implementation. I think we'll hear a bit more from her later on during the panel as well. Next, we will move on to 3 speaking slots of 10 minutes each by our distinguished lineup of speakers before moving into a panel discussion. And there will be a panel discussion where the audience can quickly key in their questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screens, and we would try to address them if time permits at the end. So without further ado, let me first invite Mr. Muhammad Nazri Mizayuddin, Chief Strategic Officer of the Sustainable Energy Development Authority, or Seda, to share about the Malaysian Renewable Energy Roadmap. Mr. Nazri has over 21 years of experience in the corporate sector and government-linked companies, spanning over multiple industries such as research and development, central bank and financial services, and also in the oil and gas sector. Prior to his appointment, he was the Vice President of Bank Rakyat and Retirement Fund Incorporated, or QUAP. Previously, he also held the position of the Head of Sustainable Development Reporting and Communications and the Investment Committee member at PETRONAS as well. Over to you, Mr. Nazri, to share about the Malaysian Renewable Energy Roadmap.
Thank you, Daniel. Your Excellency, Charles Hay, CEO of BMCC, and other distinguished speakers, good afternoon. As a start, I would like to share some overview and introduction on the Sustainable Energy Development Authority, or Seda Malaysia. Seda was established back on 1st September 2011 under the Seda Act 2011, and we are a statutory body under Ministry of Energy and Natural Resources. We are an implementing agency for key RE programs such as Feed-in Tariff, or FIT, and we envision to continue to promote and facilitate the implementation of the national policy. Okay, here is just to show to you that the Malaysia RE Roadmap, or MIRA we call it, that was launched back in 30th December 2021 by our YB Minister with the objectives of, number one, to determine the renewable energy targets in the electricity mix up to 2035. And also, secondly, to determine the strategies required to achieve renewable energy targets. The initiatives under this roadmap are expected to support Malaysia's commitment to reduce the greenhouse gas, or GHG, emission under the Paris Agreement led by UNFCCC, which is to reduce economic-wide carbon intensity, which is against the GDP of 45% by 2030. And secondly, to support the 12th Malaysian Plan in its pledge towards the net zero carbon emission by 2050. So this roadmap, or MIRA, will also help optimize the socio-economic benefits from the development of RE industry in Malaysia as a whole, which will positively contribute towards the relevant SDG goals in the climate change agenda towards decarbonizing the power sector for a better future. So MIRA is basically guiding principles in our pursuit to deliver reliable green power for all. Based on the objectives that we have highlighted above on the top left box, which is to have a renewable energy installed capacity mix of 31% by 2025 and 40% by 2035. I would also like to share the principles in formulating the RE capacity projections. So if we look at the box on the right, we have three main triangles there. So if you exclude the center triangle, which we coin all this triangle as the energy trilemma that we look at, in which is the roadmap aims to strike a balance between environmental targets, secondly, to maintain energy system stability, or system security, and also to ensure well-balanced economic benefits, such as the affordability of the general public or the rakyat. So under the 8th Malaysian Plan, back in 2001 and 2005, the Small Renewable Energy Power, or SREP program, was introduced. Along with the biomass power generation and cogen full-scale model demonstration, or BioGen project, leveraging on the readily available oil palm-based products and also small-scale electricity generation. Then subsequently, under the 9th Malaysian Plan, we've recorded further progress. So this is the phase between 2006 and 2010, with the development of rooftop solar becoming more prominent in Malaysia through the Malaysian Building Integrated Photovoltaic Projects, or MBIPV. Next, the programs implemented under the 8th and 9th Malaysian Plan led to the subsequent development of the National RE Policy and Action Plan in 2010. So this is aiming to establish a policy guide of RE development in Malaysia. During this period, the RE Act and the Seda Act were enacted, leading to the establishment of the Seda Malaysia. So moving forward, Seda alongside other industry players are working towards realizing national RE aspiration, and also projected to increase the share of RE to 31% or 13 gigawatt in 2025 and 40% or equivalent to 18 gigawatt in 2035. The key RE programs in Malaysia, I would like to share with you the mechanism and program that started since 2011. So Seda Malaysia reached its first decade of milestone last December. And through the feed-in tariff or FIT program implemented, the RE development in the country has seen a significant positive growth. The introduction of NAM program back in 2016 also has helped facilitate and support this transition, especially after the solar PV quota through FIT mechanism has been fully taken up. So current NAM program aims to ensure the continuity on PV industry development in the country, and also it could benefit the general public or the rakyat and the domestic users in general. Currently, the program is on its third phase. We call it as NAM 3.0, and will end by end of December 2023. Also looking at the achievement or success stories of the program so far that was introduced by the government, it is not a singular effort by Seda alone to achieve this. Various collaborations, especially with the government sector, the industry players, and as well as private sectors, have brought about to where we are now. So from 2011, just to share, the early movers or the companies who are involved with us in the FIT program grew together with Seda, and as the FIT program continues, more startup companies or SME have been established in Malaysia. Through this win-win growth situation, the impact is that we could also see higher productivity and efficiency in the industry, and eventually we can see cost reduction and enable more interest in the RE ecosystem. So this chart is to show that the global trends shows the demand on renewables increasing over the decade, and Malaysia aspires to grow our RE profile in view of this resource potential. So this is part of MIRA, where we can see that deployment of RE resources globally in power sector has accelerated considerably in the past few years. So according to the IRENA, from 2012 to 2020, 1,356 gigawatt of new RE capacity has been installed globally. Solar, wind, and hydro have become the main contributor to the RE capacity addition. And as a result, you can see that large capacity additions, the RE sources account for about 36.6% of total installed capacity. So this is quite a huge benchmark we're looking at. Next, please. Therefore, towards 2025, 1.2 gigawatt of RE capacity additions are planned to reach the RE 31% target. And the bulk of it, if you can see from the top right, hydro and solar, the two top main contributor. And then post 2025, 7.1 gigawatt of coal capacity under existing PPA is expected to be retired. So this new capacity target is set as a pathway to displace some of the coal capacity with RE and natural gas to some extent. So RE share in the capacity mix to increase to 40% by 2035, with a vision of paving the pathway towards a low carbon energy system. The Malaysia RE roadmap is a strategic framework driven by these 4 key technology specific strategic pillars and supported by 4 cross-technology enabling initiatives. Technology specific pillars that I would like to share here is number 1, if you can see this, number 1 is solar. The solar energy pillar is built upon existing programs, but to be complemented with the possibility of introducing new business model as we move forward. In terms of bioenergy, secondly, the bioenergy pillar aims to increase its capacity by supporting the rollout of biomass, biogas, and waste to energy capacity under the existing FIT. And also we would like to explore other potential opportunities in bio-CNG and biomass co-firing. Thirdly, for hydro, support to accelerate deployment and operations of hydro generation capacity. The 4th pillar is the new resources and technology. So post 2025, roll out of new RE resources and explore solutions to maintain system stability under the high VRE penetration. In terms of the bottom part is the enabling initiatives, which we look at to future-proof the electricity market for other opportunities and supported by improved access to financing, shaping human capital, and also increase in system flexibility as we move forward towards 2035. This is to share with you some of the financial incentives from other relevant agencies, besides Seda, to spur RE growth in Malaysia. We have Green Tech and Dana Jamin offering GTFS, right now GTFS 3.0. Under MIDA, we have ITA and GITE for tax allowance and tax exemptions. And there are other sustainable responsible investment initiative for SRI. So on this takeaway slide here, I would like to share with you that the MIRA formulates strategies to actually achieve the government commitment or target for 31% RE share in the national installed capacity, and to further decarbonize the power generation sector until 2035 by maintaining affordability and system stability. This roadmap will also help optimize the socio-economic benefits from development of RE in Malaysia, whilst positively contribute towards a global climate change agenda in decarbonizing the power sector for a better future. So, and also to achieve the stipulated RE targets and aspiration commitment by the policymakers. Last but not least, about a year ago, I would like to share with you that in the Energy Transition Index, or ETI, Malaysia is ranked 38th among the 115 countries and maintain the lead in energy transition efforts among developing and also emerging Asia. So while we have performed very well in a certain attributes such as energy across in terms of access and security, there's still opportunity to improve in areas such as the share of RE and also decreasing the conventional energy production to a certain extent. So I believe the production of the Malaysia RE roadmap last year will be most timely to demonstrate a socially just energy transition towards a more environmentally sustainable future. So when an energy transition is socially just, I guess it embodies the inclusivity and to ensure wealth is equitably distributed. Thank you. Over to you, Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Nazri. Thank you for sharing about the Malaysian renewable energy roadmap, and we could see how solar and hydro play an important role for us to achieve that target set for 2025 and 2035. So next up, we have with us today IR James Ng, who's Group Chief Operating Officer of Sarawak Energy Berhad. And I think this is very nicely tied to the talk earlier, because we're talking about hydro as one of the main sources, and Sarawak is definitely one of the major contributors to the RE in the country. So he will share about Sarawak's journey in energy transition throughout this past 2 or 3 decades and how it fits into the pathway towards net zero carbon. IR James is responsible for the vision and strategy of the group's operating units and oversees the execution of critical and transformative operational strategic initiatives while maintaining engineering and operational excellence. So let me pass the time now to IR James to share about Sarawak's journey in energy transition.
Thank you, Daniel. His Excellencies Charles Hayes, British High Commissioners to Malaysia, Jennifer Lopez, Chief Executive Officers, British Malaysian Chambers of Commerce, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First of all, on behalf of Sarawak Energy, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to British Malaysian Chambers of Commerce, Energies Committees for inviting Sarawak Energy to be part of this important event. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share with you an overview of Sarawak Energy stories in energy transition and development. To start with, Sarawak Energy, located at the eastern part of Malaysia on the islands of Borneo, is an energy development group of companies and a vertically integrated power utility wholly owned by the governments of Sarawak, built on a foundation of 100 years of powering Sarawak. We have grown a great deal over that span of time, growing from our humble beginning as a single unit under the Public Works Departments in the Brooke administrations into Malaysia's largest renewable energy developers today. We serve Sarawak population of 3 million populations through 740,000 account holders. These include domestic, commercial and industrial customers, as well as export customers. Our businesses and operations are supported by a workforce of 5,400 talents, mostly Sarawakians. Our energy transformation journey has truly accelerated in the past decade or so, since the launch of the Sarawak Corridor of Renewable Energies Industrial Park, where we began to take a holistic view of energy developments to balance energy security, sustainability, and affordability to drive socio-economic transformations. We are focused on ensuring a balanced and sustainable generation mix with predominantly renewable hydropower, complemented by indigenous thermal resources of coal and gas generation for energy security and diversities. We maintain energy affordability by providing among the most competitive tariff in the regions by leveraging on our hydropower developments. With the guidance of the Sarawak government, we are now ahead of the sustainable energy development curve, transitioning from a generation mix that was 100% fossil fuel when we first started in the early 1920s to 90% fossil fuel in 2010 and to predominantly 70% renewable hydropower today. We are now Malaysia's largest renewable energy developers. As mentioned earlier, as part of our holistic energy development efforts, we have consistently increased the share of renewable in our generation mix and installed capacity since 2010. Within a decade from 2010 to 2020, we transitioned our generation mix from predominantly fossil fuel to 70% renewable hydropower generation as of today. We continue to integrate large and small hydros and large-scale floating solar into our generation mix by 2030 and beyond. Currently, we have 3 large hydropower plants in operations: Patang Air, Pakun, Murung, with a combined generation capacity of more than 3,500 megawatts. And we are currently developing the 1,285 megawatt Vale hydropower project, expected to be completed in 2027. Our hydropower developments are guided by the International Commission of Large Dam, ICO standards and guidelines, ensure that they are built and operate safely and efficiently in accordance to the standards. The developments of our new hydro plants is also guided by the IHA Sustainability Assessment Protocol, now formally embedded in our project development process. We also operate 5 main thermal, gas and coal-fired power plants for security of supply. Over the past many years, Sarawak enjoyed plenty of rainfall, and we are maximizing dispatching from our hydro generations. However, we must be ready for any change in weather patterns in the future. Shown here are the pictures for the 500 megawatts Mintulu gas-fired power stations, as well as the newly commissioned 800 megawatts Tanjong Kiturong combined cycle power plants. And these are our fleet for our coal-fired power plant, the 200 megawatt Sijingkat power stations, 270 megawatt Muka power stations, and the latest 600 megawatts Palingan coal-fired power stations. Palingan is going to be our last coal-fired power plant, and the Sijingkat power station will be decommissioned by 2026 as we pursue a more sustainable energy future in line with COP26 aim to ramp up commitments to reduce emission by 2030. Leveraging on renewable hydropower has enabled us to decarbonize our power system, leading to a decrease in the carbon emission intensity by more than 70% from 2011 to 2020. We are aligning our business toward Paris Agreement's targets for electricity sectors on climate change. We are tracking our grid emission intensity. Currently, our grid emissions intensity is between 2 degrees Celsius and 1.5 degrees Celsius, and this is verified. We are targeting to further reduce our main grid emission intensity by increasing our renewable energy capacity and renewable energy share in the generation mix, improving energy efficiency, others. And our effort will also contribute significantly to Malaysia targets to reduce carbon emission intensities by 45% come 2030. Sarawak Energy is fully aligned with the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals, specifically on the 6 goals shown here. We believe renewable hydropower developments play an important role in realizing the UN sustainability goal and enabling climate actions. We are the first corporate body in Malaysia to pledge towards the business ambitions for 1.5 degrees C. With this, we commit to contribute towards climate actions through science-based targets enabled by renewable hydropowers. As one of the Southeast Asia leading advocate for responsible hydropower development, we are also aligned with the San Jose Declaration on Sustainable Hydropower Principle launched at the World Hydropower Congress last year, 2021. For sustainable hydropower to deliver ongoing benefits, we are committed to the principle that the only acceptable hydropower is sustainable hydropower. Sustainable hydropower requires stakeholders to work together, where sustainable hydropower is a clean, green, modern, and affordable solutions to climate change, risk mitigation, and adaptations. As part of our sustainable development efforts and to become a developed Sarawak state by 2020, Sarawak continued to emphasize the importance of energy transitions. Under Sarawak post-COVID-19 Development Strategy 2030, renewable energy will be key to sustainable growth and prosperity for Sarawak through affordable, renewable, and reliable energies to drive our economic sectors. In greening Sarawak and ensuring a more sustainable energy futures for Sarawak, we aim to promote and increase private sector's participation in renewables by investing in solar, landed solar, and the floating solar, in biomass, and also in mini hydros. We are also looking to stimulate the Sarawak hydrogen economy by focusing on green hydrogen productions and exports, and positioning Sarawak as the hub for the hydrogen value chain. We are also encouraging net energy metering for domestic, commercial, and industrial renewable energy generations. And we promote electric vehicles usage to reduce carbon emissions and decarbonize the transportation sectors. And we enhancing the power export potentials of Sarawak renewable energies by increasing interconnectivities within the regions. Currently, we are developing the first floating solar farm in our Batang Air hydropower plants. This 50 megawatts floating solar farm is expected to be commissioned next year, and is compatible with our earlier investment in hydropower developments and will enable us to further decarbonize our power grid. In 2019, working together with the Sarawak Ministry of Utility and Telecommunications, we launched the inaugural Sustainability and Renewable Energy Forums. Sarawak First Renewable Energy Certificates, REC, was launched in this event to allow greater participation from corporations in a more sustainable energy future, encouraging them to source 100% of electricity from renewable sources and boost renewable energy uptake and integration. Yeah. On the advancing into hydrogen economies, renewable hydropowers has given us the platforms to advance Sarawak green energy agenda. We were able to explore further new cleaner energy source to build a more sustainable energy futures for Sarawak. In 2017, we were tasked by the Sarawak government to spearhead research into hydrogen production as part of Sarawak green energy agenda to decarbonize our transportation system and facilitate the transition to a low carbon economy. This led us to build and commission the Southeast Asia first hydrogen production plant and refilling station in Kuching in 2019. Today, the facility of this hydrogen plant and the refilling station serve only 3 hydrogen buses and 2 hydrogen fuel cells vehicles, which we regard this as a successful pilot project. This facility is assisting in our research to green the transportation sectors through hydrogen fuel cells. The Sarawak government has a clear green energy agenda and as part of this, different stakeholders are coming together to work towards decarbonizing Kuching transportation system, including enhancing public transport options and encouraging adoption of green vehicles among citizens. Renewable hydropowers developments has opened the opportunity for Sarawak to develop transmission interconnection by sharing our renewable energy resources with our neighbors on the islands of Borneo. Collectively, the various projects within Borneo form an important part of the broader ASEAN power grid, which was established under the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in 1997, and which Sarawak Energy is spearheading and advocating for. We aspire to become a regional powerhouse by advancing renewable hydropower developments and becoming the battery of ASEAN. We are focused and moving forward with our plans to establish an interconnected Borneo via the Borneo grid and subsequently the ASEAN grid. Thank you once again for giving Sarawak Energy the opportunity to share with you an overview of Sarawak Energy stories and sharing our growth and transformation over the past centuries, as well as our regional ambitions. Thank you.
Thank you, James, for a very comprehensive sharing and very interesting as well, looking at the technologies and also the ambitions to be part of the ASEAN Power Grid. Last but not least, we have today Dr. Rizal Khairi, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Nano Malaysia. And through his talk, we're going to talk about transitioning through hydrogen and electric vehicles, which is something of the future, or is it something that's already here today? So we'll hear from him later. Let me just quickly introduce. He's a CEO of Nano Malaysia Berhad, which is a company limited by guarantee under the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation to act as a business entity entrusted with nanotechnology commercialization activities. And it's one of the currently one of the government entities looking into the new hydrogen technology economy roadmap, as well as on EV technology as well. So without further ado, let's welcome Dr. Rizal to give his sharing.
Thank you, Mr. Daniel. It is a pleasure indeed for me to be given the honor to to share Nano Malaysia's effort and initiative in nudging the country, the nation, towards hydrogen and looking into consolidation of electric vehicles initiative in the country. So I will start with going straight to the point. We have been entrusted by the government of Malaysia to draft out the nation's hydrogen economy and technology roadmap. And in our own stable at the agency level, we have been given the trust by the government through the economic planning unit to build a version of the hydrogen economy through a program called Hydrogen Eco Nanomai under the 12 Malaysia Plan. So the hydrogen economy and technology roadmap, as the name suggests, we are trying to put in place a balance to look not just on what is good for the country in terms of the economic returns or what hydrogen can offer in terms of opportunities, but also into what can be disrupted, what can be developed, what can be deployed for Malaysia's benefit to ensure that there is a balance on getting the international players to set foot in Malaysia to assist the country towards net zero via hydrogen pathway, and also spearheading the initiatives locally to ensure that Malaysians, intellectual properties, technology, so on and so forth, have a place in the country's hydrogen ecosystem at some point. And the roadmap is duly prepared for MOSTI. It is sponsored by MOSTI, but for the greater good of the nation. And it's a consolidated effort between Nano Malaysia, the Nanotech Center, Academy of Sciences of Malaysia, Malaysian Green Technology Climate Change Center, and Nano Verify. Since the roadmap is a work in progress, we have passed through the technical committee meeting, of which we have duly presented the draft final, waiting for the steering committee to provide the final stamp of approval before we put some final refinement treatment to the roadmap and prior to launching it and making it public. But I can share the snapshot of which we have duly drafted for the governments of Malaysia to consider to be adopted in their game plan towards adopting a fully fledged hydrogen economy. So let's start with the notion of hydrogen. Typically what's available out there, we are aware that Malaysia is also rich in hydrocarbon. So hence the presence of the gray hydrogen, which is produced via fossil fuel, is very much in abundance, and it provides the cheapest alternative out there at $1.50 per kilogram. So this will be our short-term economic gain. It does release CO2. It does provide an immediate economic opportunity for the likes of PETRONAS, which is the custodian of the oil and gas ecosystem in Malaysia. But the real game plan is we need to start to phase out the availability of grey hydrogen to remove the nasty carbon footprint that it provides. So naturally, the progression towards blue hydrogen becomes an immediate to medium-term opportunity for the country as a whole, but PETRONAS in particular, after rounds and rounds of engagement with the oil and gas giant in Malaysia. So blue hydrogen represents the capture of the carbon emitted, and of course, typically when you introduce an additional system, it will double up the price. So by rule of thumb, from $1.50, it will double up to $3 per kilogram. But it does provide the immediate transition solution, short-term to medium-term, for us to further decarbonize the Malaysian energy sector specifically, but as a nation as a whole. But the real game plan is aligning to what IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, on the global hydrogen scene. IRENA has set these 3-decade targets of achieving the levelized cost of hydrogen at $1 per kilogram by 2050. So we have adopted that target and incorporated into our proposed roadmap, of which we understand how we need to address the gap. If you look at what we have presented here, the value proposition of green hydrogen, there's still a long way to go. At $6 per kilogram, of which green hydrogen can be produced via renewable energy, presents a long-term strategic goal for Malaysia, somewhere in between, of which may provide a bit of coupling to green hydrogen will be turquoise hydrogen, another version of which hydrogen can still be produced in a renewable sense by using pyrolysis via natural gas. But it does provide a mid-term solution for the country to consider. But due to the lower subscale economy, turquoise hydrogen is currently selling at $10 per kilogram. When you look into the whole gamut of how Malaysia can participate, we consolidate the opportunities presented by grey going into blue, some in between where we have turquoise, which can provide some solution, although it's much more expensive than green, but green provides us the longer term, of which we can use solar energy as a source to generate hydrogen as a form of fuel or other kind of use for the country to consider. But another underlying philosophy towards this hydrogen roadmap that we have adopted would be, we know for a fact Malaysia cannot do it all. The concept of partnering with international players have pivoted us into this fundamental philosophy of the roadmap, of which we have adopted the concept of build some, buy some. So the build some component is where the technology component of the roadmap comes into play. We need Malaysian IPs, technology and solution to be part and parcel of the value chain and supply chain. The buy some part is when we know for a fact that we cannot do it all. We need to have partners from all around the world to participate via massive procurement for us to jump into the hydrogen bandwagon in an expedited or expeditious way. So going forward, moving to the right-hand side of the hydrogen roadmap game plan, is we need to align ourselves with what IRENA has positioned itself towards achieving for the global market, i.e. $1 per kilogram in terms of market price of LCOH. So this entails on putting in place the right hydrogen infrastructure, the right kind of tool system to generate hydrogen. Sarawak is probably like 5 years ahead already. So I applaud the effort made by Sarawak, which is also part of the many entities that we have engaged with to draft the hydrogen roadmap, to look into how we can benefit from the available renewable energy. So Sarawak has that that advantage, the barcode advantage. But another opportunity that presents to us would be Malaysia to create that nationwide hydrogen ecosystem. Granted, producing hydrogen is one game plan, but having the local ecosystem to adopt it will be another Herculean task for us to put in place. So what we have put in place here is a concept of concomitant approach, i.e., while we are going into the business of producing hydrogen, while the local ecosystem is still being developed, the nation should focus on exporting out these hydrogen, green hydrogen or blue hydrogen to other economies that are much more matured in terms of their local or domestic ecosystem. This would create an immediate economic returns for the country to benefit, and those returns, those national so-called revenue, can be plowed back into developing Malaysia's own domestic ecosystem in the form of storage, conversion, reconversion, having the refueling infrastructure, sufficient fuel cells vehicle in the forms of buses, trucks, and even smaller vehicles. So this is what is put in place, the philosophy of it. And another idea that is being thrown around when we draft up this hydrogen economy would be what would be the penetration rate or adoption rate of hydrogen in the power sector? Because going full hydrogen in a short period of time would be too disruptive. So another idea here is to look into co-blending, how we can blend in green ammonia, blue ammonia, or hydrogen itself in co-blending, mixing with natural gas, fossil fuel, coal, and whatnot at a certain level of percentage to allow it to be incorporated in the national energy mix. And there's a lot of naysayers with regards to hydrogen because of the efficiency of certain percentage losses across the value chain, from generation to storage, logistics, reconversion, and eventual reconversion to electricity. But bear in mind, when it comes to renewable energy, especially VRE, variable renewable energy, which covers the sun, the wind, something which you cannot have, you have very little control of, and to have a large-scale battery to store this excess energy will be very tremendous effort in terms of capex, huge amount of investment. Hydrogen provide a much cheaper alternative for long-term storage of those excess electricity to be converted to hydrogen and to be reconverted into electricity at some point. So this will be the fundamental value proposition of hydrogen for Malaysia's long-term game plan towards decarbonization, towards reaching that so-called 2050 mark, of which the whole of country, the whole of nation would allow. So other key questions which will be disclosed once the roadmap will be launched will be, what are the key interventions that should be put in place by the government to ensure full adoption by all sectors by 2050 in the long term, how hydrogen can contribute to the reduction of greenhouse gas emission, and what are the pertinent sectors that will be useful for hydrogen adoption, such as transportation, manufacturing, agriculture, commercial, and whatnot. So that will be the macro view. In terms of the micro view, at Nano Malaysia's game plan or program under the 12 Malaysia plan, we've given the opportunity to create our version of the hydrogen economy, which is under our direct control. So we've given a certain amount of budget under the 12 Malaysia plan's high impact project to create a nanotech-based hydrogen economy, to look into some of those nucleotic or nucleus technology that can be grown further, of which Malaysia in itself should probably stand a good playing chance to commercialize this IP and to be part of the not just domestic, but also regional and the global supply chain in terms of some of the key technologies. So some of the focus of our technological development eventually be deployed commercially in the market of under hydrogen eco-nanomine will be solid state hydrogen, something to consider beyond the heavy capex cost to compress hydrogen in gaseous form, using the aid of certain raw materials, certain advanced material, and nanocatalysts. And in the mobility sector, we have come up with this very unique storage system called hydrogen hybrid energy storage system, or H2SS, which fuses or blend, which allow the blending in of use of hydrogen fuel cell, ultracapacitors, and battery and solid state reactors to provide this very robust and dynamic energy supply to provide the kind of power to an automotive system as and when it is needed for long-term use, for short-term, for that burst of power to speed on the highway. And of course, to support the bigger picture of the production of green hydrogen, the key component here would be electrolyzer. Currently, electrolyzer seems to be the bottleneck of efficiency criticism, because an electrolyzer requires 55 kilowatt hour of energy to produce 1 kilogram of hydrogen. But 1 kilogram of hydrogen can only produce 33 kilowatt hour of energy. So there is a 60% efficiency there. So we have taken the task upon us to look into improving that conversion efficiency from electricity to hydrogen using some of those key advanced material presented by nanotechnology development. But last but not least, starting with the end in mind, not only we look into some of those materials, system components, conversion technology, but also the end use applications such as motorcycle, buses and trucks and stationary. We call it the placeholder commercialization strategy. While we are developing some of the key components, we are also capturing the downstream market to ensure that Malaysia has a reasonable chance for us to push through the IPs developed locally and to be incorporated into some of these end use cases, such as the one listed here: drones, motorcycle, buses, trucks, and other stationary applications. In terms of electric vehicles, this is something I can elaborate further because we have very clear programs mandated by the government of Malaysia for us to position Malaysia potentially as an EV technology hub in the nation. But a bit of a backdrop, all of you are aware that last year the government made an announcement in terms of providing some tax incentive to allow the floodgates to be open to get to expedite the creation of a local EV industry in Malaysia, which covers on import duty exemption, excise exemption, sales exemption, not just the cars, but also infrastructure, of which MITI has decided to form an EV task force under the National Automotive Policy by 2020 to establish and strengthen Malaysia's EV ecosystem, which Nano Malaysia is duly part of that group. The Ministry of Science and Technology Innovation has also declared 2022 to be a year of which the ministry shall focus on developing the EV technology ecosystem from the technological perspective, of which we are developing local IPs towards component system that will contribute to the local and also regional and global EV market that is growing. This is also supported by the low carbon mobility blueprint, which is under the purview of the Ministry of Environment and Water, aligning to some of those strategic number 4 under the National Transport Policy ending 2030. So here we provide across the spectrum of the value chain, from not just materials to devices, to components, to system and use cases, to showcase that Malaysia has a capability to develop the baseline of EV technology in the country for it to be commercialized and adopted, not just in Malaysia, but in other countries as well. We realize that Malaysia may not be able to play in terms of the end user products such as cars, but we have a good fighting chance to participate in developing some of the key components. This is our aspiration, which Nano Malaysia, mandated by the government of Malaysia, has this ambition towards positioning Malaysia as a technology validation and market validation hub. Being a relatively smaller market, we are looking at leveraging some of the opportunities presented by ASEAN and APEC, of which we activate all the value chain, starting from advanced material, EV components, device and system, intellectual properties, to position Malaysia uniquely to participate in the development of the EV global market beyond just trading, beyond distributorship, beyond just assembly, which we deem to be low value. So we start with our first program called Emerge, which stands for Enabling Mobility Electrification for Green Economy. So we have activated some key projects which will be instrumental in positioning Malaysia as a EV technology player, at least in ASEAN, of which project number 1 focuses on the conversion of EV from ICE to EV using the hybrid system, which allows for the blending in of hydrogen, battery, and ultracapacitor, developing high energy density batteries, which is critical because battery represents about 60% to the cost of any EV. So if you can improve the energy density of a battery, you may have a game winner there. And of course, Malaysia do have some level of competency in two-wheelers. We have companies in Malaysia who can actually build motorcycles, and we shall use our system to be incorporated into their design. And going into charging station, we would like to move away from overburdening Tenaga Nasional's electricity grid, because we need to ensure that there's some robustness and flexibility in terms of placing in EV charging infrastructure. They need not be grid dependent. So we're looking at purely dependent on solar with a bit of energy storage to ensure that EV charging infrastructure can be dynamically, robustly, flexibly deployed anywhere and everywhere in Malaysia. And of course, project number 5, wireless charging, which is also a game changer. And last but not least, something which is closer to our competency will be on the thermal management system for EV. Under the second program called Rapid Electric Vehicle Validation Innovation Ecosystem called Revive, this initiative focuses on EV conversion. We realize that places like the UK, even China and Indonesia, they have legalized conversion of EV to make it roadworthy from IC to EV. Malaysia, we still have some challenges to overcome. So we have activated this initiative, and for the very first time, silos have been broken. We are able to congregate all the relevant players in Malaysia, starting from the campuses under the Ministry of Higher Education, the Road Transport Department, JPJ, the Malaysian Green Tech Corporation, MARI, the Automotive for Robotics and IoT Institute, Standards Malaysia, MIDA, and other players such as JKR, the National Works Department, and the insurance ecosystem to support the conversion. So we are well on our way, and God willing, by the end of this year, we should be able to come up with a white paper to streamline conversion standard operating procedure to allow for not just for manufacturer, but individual citizens to convert their EVs for ICE cars to EV. Next would be creating sandboxes around Malaysia. So you need a place for you to validate your technology, especially when it is disruptive. So we have partnered with various universities in Malaysia. The ones shown here have enlisted to be part of that clever initiative, which stands for Campuses for Local Electric Vehicle Expeditious Rollout, of which we have a number of sub-programs to look into: ICE to EV conversion, battery swapping system to be tested on campus, EV fast charger, off-grid EV charging, small-scale EV deployment, and graphene improved batteries before we roll out to the market. So this will provide some level of risk mitigation before a fully fledged EV market becomes real in Malaysia. So a bigger initiative which will support not just EV, but also renewable energy initiative, which can also have a vast impact, not just in Malaysia, but ASEAN as well, will be Nano Malaysia Energy Storage Technology Initiative, or NESTI. It has been duly mentioned by the Prime Minister in last year's session at the lower house, of which NESTI was mentioned as part of the 12 Malaysia plan. So energy storage, as a background, is a concept of which you store, capture energy to be used later. There are many versions of it, but we shall focus on a few with the very clear techno-economic targets. So the energy storage initiative is supported by all these needs statement. We have the national policy program that screams for energy storage to be mainstream, such as the feed-in tariff, large-scale solar, net energy metering, access energy rather than pushing it to the grid. You can store for your own use at a later day, for commercial or domestic use. The fourth industrial revolution policy have pushed a lot on digital infrastructure, devices system. All of this require energy storage. And you can charge your mobile devices and system within minutes. And low carbon mobility supports that. The expansion of electric vehicle global market has supported that. ASEAN countries such as Indonesia and Thailand is also screaming for this supply chain of batteries to support their respective domestic markets to grow EV. So we have some focus area. We look into developing battery technologies, ultra capacitor, solid state hydrogen, system that monitors the power of the battery, and also some circular component towards this program is battery recycling, second life use of battery, and urban or phyto mining, of which you can extract or re-extract those used rare earth to be recycled and to be incorporated into those batteries. And this is beyond technological play. We do have techno-economic targets because we have to be grounded by our ambition. Currently, the performance of the cost of batteries sits around $137 per kilowatt hour last couple of years. But the main target is by 2030 is to reach $80 per kilowatt hour to achieve parity, to ensure that at this so-called price point or cost point, EV will be at parity with ICE, so it becomes massively deployed. And to realize that, to make that ambition a reality, there are a lot of tactical development agenda needs to be put in place. So with the energy density target needs to be more than 300 watt-hour per kilogram. Tesla's current performance is about 256 watt-hour per kilogram, whereas hydrogen storage is far cheaper compared to batteries at only $8 per kilowatt-hour. Hence why hydrogen earlier on in my presentation provides a better opportunity for long-term storage in terms of energy carrier. So this presents a snapshot of what we are developing in Malaysia, the circular economy concept of sustainable battery utilization in the country. Spent batteries are not discarded. It needs to be tested. If it's viable, it can be used for stationary application, residential, stationary storage, urban e-mobility, or even charging station. When they are truly at the end of their life, then it can be broken down into pieces via chemical process of phytomining using Malaysia's biodiversity, flora and flora, of course, not fauna. It can be the raw material, the rare earth can be extracted and be used to manufacture fresh batteries. So this will be our inclusive approach. There's no way Nano Malaysia can do it all. We need partners. So spanning over from PETRONAS, TM, Tenaga Malaysia, UMW, EVC, universities, agencies, and whatnot. So this model uses the quintuple helix, of which we have participation from the agencies, funding authorities, research community, industries, and even end users to understand how fast they can adopt and how fast the industry can be developed. And we have very clear economic targets, such as creating high-value jobs for Malaysia, creating startups and SMEs, IPs, and commercializing products. So this will be a snapshot of our program, of which Nano Malaysia as a venture builder, we are creating the future by design. We work with industry, we work with the end user, we work with the universities to create IPs that can be developed in Malaysia, so that Malaysia has a fighting chance to participate in the global supply chain for both hydrogen economy and EV technology as well. So we have a governance structure in place. We report up to the Minister of MOSTI to look into the technological component of hydrogen e-mobility before we escalate up all the way to the Prime Minister for possible intervention if need be. So this is an evidence of what we have done in Malaysia. We have proven the fact that our hydrogen fuel cell battery is working. We have deployed it in our race car on the Caterham 7 body to showcase that it works and it's running well. And we also have a partner with the likes of Hyundai ecosystem. You can see the value chain here to look into battery recycling, charging infrastructure, battery swapping on micro-mobility first to ensure that Malaysia will incorporate our locally developed technology in the Hyundai value chain and global market eventually. And last but not least, our game plan towards the battery management system as a key component towards developing the EV ecosystem in Malaysia becomes a reality by the launch last year. So with that, I conclude my presentation. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Back to you, Mr. Daniel.
Thank you, Dr. Rizal, for sharing on the interesting work Nano Malaysia is involved in. We really apologize that we are really behind time right now, but let's move on to a short time of discussion, and let me invite Brian Pai, the chairman of the PMCC Energy Committee, to probably just a couple of words to introduce himself, and then let's invite all the speakers to turn on their video so that we could just address one or two questions very quickly. Over to you, Brian.
Good afternoon and good morning, or wherever you may be in the world. I would just like to say sincere thanks to all the speakers again. I won't mention you all by name. You've been mentioned many times, As Daniel says, unfortunately, we've run out of time to really run the full panel session, but what I'm really happy to report is that the quality of the presentations and the content has been so comprehensive that when I review my list of questions, it's very easy just to knock most of them out because you've done such a good job in already answering them in your presentation. So thank you very much for that. It's done a lot of the work already. So I'm just going to ask two very simple things, and I'm going to ask for a sentence from each of the panelists, two sentences. One, and keep it very short, please, in the interest of time. I'm going to ask you to just sum up what you think the greatest challenge is to the energy transition, and at the same time, what is the biggest opportunity? So it's a sentence each on both from each of the speakers, please, to keep it very, very short in the interest of time. So we've got a couple of minutes. If you could address that for us, I think that would be fantastic. So perhaps we start with Dr. Rezal, as you were just on. You're already warmed up, and perhaps you can just sum up for us the greatest challenge and also the biggest opportunity. Two sentences, please.
Okay, greatest challenge will be disrupting pre-existing action plans. Yeah, especially in the energy policy when they may have not incorporated hydrogen into it. So that would be our current greatest challenge, to get everyone on board, to amend something which has already been so-called technically cast in stone. But yeah, that has been quite a journey, and this is still a work in progress for us to convince the local stakeholders.
Excellent.
Thank you.
And the biggest opportunity?
Yeah, it is. Opportunity is hence why the hydrogen economy and technology roadmap as such is named as such. We provide both the economic opportunity balanced with potential technological intervention to get the message across that the roadmap, although over 3 decades, can be shortened via disruptive innovation opportunities, which we are actively pursuing via our Future by Design Venture Builder framework, working with various stakeholders. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Rezal. I think you passed the test there. I'll just move across my screen as it appears. So across to you, James, would you like to take those two questions in one sentence each, please? So starting with the greatest challenge as you see it and the biggest opportunity thereafter.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, I will go by opportunity first. Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah. So, of course, Sarawak as well as Borneo are blessed with a rainfall and the geographical location, which is ideal for hydropower. So our opportunity for Sarawak as well as Borneo as a whole, we should capitalize and make full use of these renewable hydropowers, and that is our key focus and our opportunity. And of course, challenge behind is we need to ensure that the hydro is renewable and green, because we still face challenges by certain industrial saying that hydro, especially large-scale hydro, is not green. So we adopted the San Jose commitments that we must develop sustainable hydropowers. So we have to follow the sustainable hydropowers, ensuring that all the powers that we are developed are renewables and acceptable in the green energy sectors. Yeah, and I think that basically summing up our opportunities and our challenges in selling our hydropowers. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, James. And moving swiftly along to my right, Mohammed Nasri, would you like to please take those two questions in one sentence each? Again, just on the biggest challenge that you see and also the greatest opportunity.
All right. In terms of challenges that I see is basically in terms of the green sector. Apart from having all the technological and also the AI ready for the upcoming change, there are still elements of human behavior, choices to make preferable type of, perhaps on the consumer perspective, the consumer consumption that contribute to the momentum of this transition. But nevertheless, in terms of opportunity, in Seda is also taking part in continuously support the government agenda and benefit the general public, which is we in Seda promote the energy efficiency program through, we call it Sustainable Achieve via energy efficiency, or SAFE, we coin it. And this program gives rebates of 200 ringgit for consumers to buy like 4 or 5-star rating energy efficient air condition, fridge, And we've also continued this year with Safe 3.0. So with added appliances like washing machine, TV, kettles, and microwaves. So that is something that an opportunity that we are promoting as well.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mohammed Nasri. And finally, and by no means least, Charlotte, over to you. And just a reminder, one sentence on each of the greatest challenge and the biggest opportunity that you see from a PETRONAS perspective, please.
That is a real challenge that you've posted. There's a lot to be said about the energy transition, as we've heard in the last hour or so. I think a major challenge is to have a common vision of the transition and make sure that we have complementary policy that's not undermining one another, and complementary investments so that we actually have a common vision. I think that's critical, and this is in not just Malaysia but globally. The various instruments are actually not aligned, but the opportunity I see is in collaboration, and I think we heard it just from Dr. Rizal now, how we must create demand and supply at the same time. I think in PETRONAS case, but also Malaysia more generally, we have fantastic customer relationships to build on internationally, but also nationally, to develop the demand and supply at the same time and collaborate like never before on the energy transition. And the opportunity space is bigger than it's ever been.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Charlotte. I think you've all done an excellent job in meeting the challenge here, so thank you very much. And Daniel, back to you.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thank you once again, Charlotte, Nasri, James, and Dr. Rizal for your presentations, and very informative. And that brings us to the end to the BMCC Energy Outlook 2022. We hope you have found this session beneficial, and we hope to have a physical event for this next year's installment for our BMCC Energy Outlook. Just before we close, I would like to highlight our upcoming event, the BMCC Business Excellence Awards Gala Night on 26 May. This is our most prestigious event of the year, where we recognize, commerce, and commemorate the very best of UK and Malaysian companies across a range of achievement categories. There'll be over 400 attendees at the Gala Night, with the presence of CEOs, C-suite level, industry leaders, professionals, and senior government officials. So we hope to see you at the Awards Gala Night at Sunway Resort on 26 May. And to find out more about the event, feel free to reach out to me or visit our website, businessexcellenceawards.bmcc.org.my. So once again, thank you to all speakers. Thank you to Brian as a moderator, and thank you to all participants in the audience. Thank you. Have a safe day, a great evening, and a safe day ahead. Thank you, everyone.